And you are taking a live look over New York City at this hour. Want to go over all of the details that we know about this, as a man has been arrested in Canada in connection with a plot to carry out a mass shooting at a Jewish center in Brooklyn on the first anniversary of the October 7th attack by Hamas on Israel. And the information did come in from the Justice Department. The DOJ identifying the suspect as a 21-year-old man. He is Muhammad Shahzeb Khan, also known as Shahzeb Jadoon. He's charged with attempting to provide material support to the ISIS terror group and was arrested while attempting to cross the Canadian border into the U.S. Federal investigators allege he told undercover law enforcement that he and another ISIS supporter based in the U.S. needed to obtain AR-style rifles, ammo, and other weapons, saying New York City was the, quote, perfect target because of its large Jewish population. He's accused of saying the plan could result in, quote, the largest attack on U.S. soil since 9/11. Do want to discuss all of this here, so let's bring in an expert. Mike Harrigan was the chief of the FBI's firearms training program. He has 30 years plus experience in law enforcement and is now a threat assessment expert at the Pax Group, LLC. Thank you so much for taking the time, as always, to be here with us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Josh.
All right, so first off, you and I have discussed this in the past, but what I wanted to ask is, overall, federal investigators, the FBI included, how do they work to determine whether or not a threat is an actual threat, if it is credible?
Yeah, that's a good question, Josh. There's a lot of work that goes into this prior to getting to the point where an arrest is made and public announcements are made on a situation like this. You know, normally what happens is there's a crush of intelligence out there, multiple agencies or many agencies, both here in the United States and abroad, that work together to vet raw intelligence, either from social media or from court authorized or national security wiretaps and other type of surveillance. And they collect that intelligence and they have to weed through it to find those that may lead or be indicative of a threat. So in this situation, clearly they had some intelligence. It looks like it came offline. This individual had some social media contacts and used some encrypted messaging apps after that. And, you know, it stuck out to them as a potential threat. So then they developed it. You know, they made contact with the individual through undercover agents, and then they saw firsthand, needed to see where this was going and whether this was potentially going to materialize into a actual physical threat.
We do know at this point the man actually lives over in Canada, and he was arrested as he was trying to cross the border over into the U.S. Considering he is a Canadian resident, does that make it a little tougher for U.S. officials to make an arrest and to figure everything out? I imagine they have to work with Canadian officials as well.
Absolutely. In this situation, just looking at the press releases, clearly the Canadian national security elements and the U.S. domestic security elements were working very closely on this all along. So they likely had some very detailed conversations about how to proceed legally on this. And from what we can see is, as would be normal, charges were lodged in Canada against this individual. At the same time, the U.S. Department of Justice has obtained charges against this individual here in the United States. So what will happen is, looks like his first court appearance is going to be where he was arrested in Canada. I believe on September 13th, he has his first court appearance up there. And then what will happen is there'll be diplomatic exchanges and conversations on how to proceed, which is the best venue in which to prosecute, whether it's better to keep him in Canada and apply those nations' laws and use that justice system, or whether it's more appropriate to extradite him here to the United States and to prosecute him here in the U.S. courts. So that conversation, I'm sure, is being had behind the scenes. And either way, I'm sure both countries are going to do what's in best interest of ensuring the safety of both Canadian citizens and United States citizens.
Are situations like this happening maybe more than the American people realize? We hear about these stories here as information is released from the DOJ, local law enforcement, state law enforcement, but are they happening more than myself and others realize?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this battle since 9/11 against Islamic extremists has been going on now for 20, almost 23 years. And the intelligence communities here in the United States, Canada, and around the world are very well developed and very attuned into the threat and spend an incredible amount of resources tracking down potential threats, developing threats, looking through mountains of raw intelligence. I mean, mountains of raw intelligence, trying to get to the point where they're separating individuals who are simply espousing a political view into those individuals who are likely to act, that are advocating for violence, further those political views. So that's the challenge. I mean, it's many of these instances are interdicted before an individual even leaves their home country through the United States and other countries, working with the host country to quickly get that person in custody prior to them actually committing an act. So that's the best case scenario. And that happens every day. Successful intelligence is passed through the relationships the United States and other countries develop internationally. And these type of plots are stopped far in advance of actually materializing. In this instance, of course, it was a little different. They were able to put undercover agents in there, and which is one of the best ways to do it, because you're hearing it straight from the perpetrator's mouth, exactly what he's saying. And you're able to see him and monitor him 24/7 in person. And you can see how his planning evolves. And then you can interdict it in a moment's notice at the point where you believe he's about to put his plans into action.
And I have to ask, because obviously there is a lot to this. Only certain information can be released. So we don't learn everything. We just learn what is released from press releases and court documents as well. But I know that federal investigators are obviously paying attention, very close attention, to situations like this year round. But I have to imagine, as we get close to the anniversary of 9/11 and, of course, October 7th, that those law enforcement officers, those investigators, are maybe even more hyper vigilant.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of, the intelligence communities and the counterterrorism task forces. I mean, they grind it out, 24/7, 365. So their work is constant. What you have is you have alerts and intelligence is passed on potential emerging threats, sensitive locations, and, through information sharing, individuals that are targeted, organizations are advised that they may be targeted or take additional security steps. Local police, state police, other federal agencies engage and increase their activity. But yeah, you look at these markers of anniversaries as potentially trigger points or points of increased threat. But the honest truth of this is, with the intelligence and how it's collected and how counterterrorism task forces work, it really doesn't revolve around that. It just goes on and on and on every day, trying to stop these threats before they materialize. Because as we talked just a few minutes ago, there's a lot of these things happening around the world, and you always want to stop it before it actually happens. Once it happens, it's too late. Lives are lost, damage is done. But the successes are where you stop these individuals before they can actually carry out their attacks.
It sounds from the DOJ court documents that were obtained that there may have potentially been someone working with this guy, because he did say that himself and a U.S.-based ISIS follower were trying to obtain these weapons to carry out the attack. I know this is kind of a general question and might be hard to answer, but are most of these considered to be lone wolf attacks, or do you see folks working in groups together, maybe in pairs or larger groups? Or does it really kind of depend on the situation?
That's a great question, Josh. And the good one you brought up there is that, there's two types. There's the lone wolves, like we had that a young man from Wells, Maine, of all places, a very small community, peaceful community, great police department up there, that traveled, without letting anybody know, traveled to New York City and attacked police officers with a machete. He had been radicalized in his basement. To others that are part of groups. So, the important thing is when they make these arrests, the amount of work behind the scenes is staggering. So what their goal is in these situations is to really look closely at these individuals who may appear to be lone wolves, but behind the scenes, they're looking very closely at electronic communications, other communications, who their associates are, to see if there's a wider conspiracy. Because that's where it gets extremely dangerous, is when one person is part of a larger group, a support group. Because they're going to want to know if this guy up in Canada, who contacted him. Was he radicalized by an outside group using methods to get a hold of him? And did he get radicalized over a period of time? Or did he come from Pakistan, potentially, immigrated into Canada, already radicalized, and then simply continued his plans and put them in place? So that's an important thing to address, and something that the counterterrorism investigative agencies are going to be looking very closely at, to ensure that this isn't part of a larger conspiracy. And if it is part of a larger conspiracy, I can guarantee they've already got a handle on it, and they're working it aggressively. So the fact that they put this individual under arrest and made a public statement tells me that, it's probably more likely a smaller type situation, maybe a lone wolf, but there are potentially and likely going to be some good intelligence information obtained from this individual and from his documents and his communications that could help Pakistan or other countries where this individual may have had contacts.
All right. Mike Harrigan, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and break it all down for us. Anything else you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
No, I think that, the media attention on this is good, and it's been good coverage. And kudos to really, I want to give kudos to the Canadians and the U.S. investigative agencies who have that strong working relationship long in advance of this situation. That was the root of this kind of cooperation that helped this be successfully come to a successful conclusion. And that really is the hallmark of what the Bureau does and the intelligence communities do, is work across international lines every day, sharing information for the benefit of the good of citizens around the world. So great piece of work here by everybody involved. And let's just hope that this is the end of this individual, and that there aren't other conspirators out there, and that the safety of America continues, and that future threats are interdicted as well as this one.
All right. Mike Harrigan, thank you again for taking the time to be here with us and breaking it all down. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Josh.